This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am, as always, your humble host, Michael Boldea. And just for the sake of posterity, today is March the 5th, the year of our Lord 2026. And I was going to put off recording today's program until Jane Fonda gave her hot take on what's happening in the Middle East. But thankfully, I won't have to because she gave her hot take 30 seconds after the first airstrike. So here we are. Now, in case you missed it, which is likely very difficult, we did strike Iran. Air sorties are still happening. Today is day 6. And I remember saying, because I remember the things I say, that it would stir up a hornet's nest if they did it during Ramadan. Not only did they attack during Ramadan, they also attacked on a Saturday, which is the Sabbath. Thankfully, I think that the entire idea of the entire Muslim world rising up against the West has been mitigated to a certain extent due to the Iranians flailing and lobbing bombs at neighbors and acquaintances alike. We're going to get into that as well because it's an important aspect of this thing. I think some people believe that it's just their desire to cause chaos. I think it's something more basic and something more telling. We'll get into that. But for those of you that don't know, and I made this comparison when we discussed this pre-war, I know it's not a declaration of war. Currently, it's just airstrikes. But for the sake of brevity, we'll just call it war. Pre-war, I said that to strike Iran during Ramadan would be like attacking the Vatican on Easter Sunday. Well, to take out the Ayatollah and then pretty much every other person within close proximity would have been like taking out the Pope and his entire council of priests that would determine who the other Pope was. So this is not a small thing. I think that given that as yet we've not seen the entire Muslim world rise up, we can ascertain that there's not much love lost for the regime. There's not much love lost for the Ayatollah, because if this was a beloved cleric, we'd have a lot more violence. I mean, there was one guy, where was it, in Austin, Texas, wearing a very telling sweatshirt, property of Allah, that went on a shooting spree. There have been warnings by the Federal Bureau of the Eye concerning sleeper cells. And we're going to get into this logically and reasonably. I am not... look, I'm noticing what's going on by a lot of individuals and noticing the things they're saying. And a lot of the deductions they're making are based on a very visible hatred of Israel. Don't know why, but you cannot filter everything you're seeing through that prism. It is unhealthy, it is unbiblical, and it's something that will taint your soul. We can look at the situation as it sits, as it is, logically, reasonably, and not through the prism of, this is all Israel's fault. Israel had decided that they were going to attack. All of the back and forth failed. They wouldn't come to an agreement. Israel said, we're going to go at it. The U.S. said, we'll join you. But like I said, there are many things to get into. Even though much of the Muslim world isn't shedding tears for the Ayatollah Khomeini. Apparently, for the New York Times, it was a very sad day. An avuncular, magnanimous, grandfatherly type met his untimely end, according to the New York Times. That's almost as sad as the Austrian painter, animal lover, vegetarian, and author, also aspiring artist, who was bullied into self-deleting back in 1945. That's pretty much the same comparison that you could make. To call this man an avuncular and magnanimous grandfatherly type is just absolute insanity on its face. So if your heart weeps for the untimely passing of the Ayatollah Khomeini, it would likely weep by the untimely passing of the Austrian painter and animal lover. The heart doth weep, doth it not? Indeed. So let's be clear on a couple of things. Let's dispel some misnomers here, because although I trust the intelligence gathering abilities of Aunt Midge in Pensacola when she says Iran is neither a threat nor an enemy of these United States, there's only so many ways you can interpret the former Ayatollah leading chants of death to America. I mean, perhaps that was their way of saying happy birthday, different beliefs and whatnot. Perhaps they were wishing us well. But then again, perhaps, just maybe, they meant exactly what they were saying. So for anyone to try to rewrite history and say that there was no animus or animosity from the Iranian regime towards America is just a bold-faced lie. But if we were to take the New York Times' narrative and conclude that the Ayatollah Khomeini was, just a harmless uncle type, we've all had that one uncle, I guess, who led everyone in the Death to America chant whenever we got together for a backyard barbecue. Because let's face it, who among us has not had one family member who, bouncing us on their knee, told us that the world must be awash in blood in order to usher in the next Mahdi? Things like that. So I get where the New York Times is coming from, don't get me wrong. However, the reality of who the Ayatollah Khomeini was is clear. This man was not avuncular, as the New York Times insists, which means sort of like an uncle or a grandfatherly type. I know it sounds like a disease, but that's what it means. He wasn't timid or non-offensive, passive, caring, magnanimous, as he was said to be by the newspaper of record. He wasn't caring or handing out lollipops to kids, all right? He was the man responsible for an actual genocide of over 500,000 people. He was the man overseeing the Iranian regime until a few days ago that was responsible for the death of 35,000 Iranian citizens within the last 2 months because they dared to go into the streets and protest. He was the man, and this is verifiable, who instructed his henchmen to violate any virgins that were slated for execution so they couldn't enter paradise upon their death. This is the monster that the Ayatollah Khomeini was. And if that's your definition of magnanimous and avuncular, then by all means, call him that. Now, for those who've lived in the bubble known as America for all of their lives, it's hard to come to terms with the reality of what living in a tyrannical regime is like. You see, I really don't care what Jane Fonda or any actor pretending to be somebody else has to say about this thing. You can tell a lot about the reality of a situation based on how the average citizen of that nation and those who were forced to flee that nation react to it. I remember back in December of '89 going through January and February. We had our own tyrant. We had our own dictator. We lived under communist rule. And even though we'd gotten kicked out back in 1984, we were still Romanians. We still had a place in our heart for the nation of our birth. And I remember the day that news leaked that Ceausescu and his wife had gotten executed. And I remember the first Sunday service of church right after that. We used to attend a Romanian church back in California. And nobody was celebrating and nobody was whooping, but because Romanians are very quiet people, except for me, I guess. But you could feel the sense of relief that was a shared experience by some 300 people that had gathered for worship, because they had lived under that oppression. They had known brothers and sisters in Christ that were snatched up in the middle of the night, never to be returned home. They tasted the pain of the batons as they crashed over their heads because they were caught in a prayer meeting. They saw their earthly goods taken away because somebody in authority deemed that they weren't sharing enough. And like I said, there was no celebration, there was no singing or dancing or whooping. Romanians don't do that. But I still remember that sense of relief. It was almost tangible. Now, there will always be those who, having been in the inner circle and profited from their proximity to the regime, that will bemoan the cessation of the gravy train they were used to. It happened in Romania. It happened every time a tyrannical government fell. Those that were within the sphere of power, those that were the ones doing the persecuting and not the persecuted, mourned and wept over the death of Ceausescu. Perhaps they did it quietly, perhaps they did it secretly, but they still did it because they understood that their way of life was ending. They could no longer bully everyone around them. They could no longer aspire to authority, undeserved or otherwise, because they were an officer or because they were a colonel or because they were in the secret police. And they understood that part of their life was ending. Now, for those people asking, well, couldn't they do it some other way? Why'd they have to kill him? 36 years. 36 years is how long the Ayatollah Khomeini had to aggregate power, to assert control and influence, and surround himself with people who would do his bidding, regardless of what was asked for them, without batting an eye. But you want us to go kill that whole village? Sure. Because the difference between a guy like Ceausescu and a guy like the Ayatollah was that Ceausescu only had political influence and power. The Ayatollah had political influence and power, and also religious influence and power. He was deemed the mouthpiece of Allah. And so anything he commanded, anything he said to the people that he surrounded himself with, it was as though it was a command from the Almighty himself. We tried to negotiate. They thought they could just drag it out until they got whatever they needed in order to hold it over the whole world. So, yes, I'm assuming there will be those who will mourn his passing. I think that doing what they're doing, lobbing missiles left and right without any target other than not here, has lost the Iranian regime a lot of goodwill. There are still some who will mourn this man's passing. But I'm looking at the average Iranian citizen and watching for their reaction. And it's very different than Jane Fonda's reaction. Please understand this. I know it's going to be hard, especially for those, we could have negotiated something. These people would not have given up power voluntarily. There is nothing that we could have offered that would have compelled the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iranian Guard to say, all right, let's have some free and fair elections in this country. For 36 years, they were the ruling class. They made the rules. They enforced the rules. And considered an entire nation of 90 million people nothing better than serfs and servants. They would not have given up voluntarily. Look, some of them, like Assad, who saw the writing on the wall, got on a plane, went to Russia. Even Ceausescu and his wife tried to flee, but they shot their helicopter down. But this man was entrenched. Now, as far as intelligence gathering goes, it was a master stroke. If you look at it from just a war-fighting point of view, they knew where all these people were gathered all at once. And they struck with such force that it did away with the entire command and control structure and discombobulated the nation to the point that they're throwing and lobbing missiles at Turkey and Kuwait and everywhere else they can. That reaction lost them much of the goodwill of the Muslim world. So yes, there are some leaders calling for jihad, but it's not going to be a united front because of their reaction to this. They can't play the victim. Now, back in the day, while I was living in California, there was a Holiday Inn. It was off of Harbor Boulevard near the 94. And it was a nice place that allowed people to come in, and for $5 they could use the pool. And one day I happened to go to the pool because it was very hot, California. And two little Mexican children were chasing each other around. I'd noticed the boy get into the shallow end But I realized he didn't know how to swim, because every time he was on his tippy toes and realized that the water was getting deep, he'd go back to the shallow end. Well, he was racing around with his sister and they were playing, and I guess he lost track of where he was. Because at a certain point, he just dives right into the deep end. And you could see that he's sinking. And thankfully, somebody was aware enough of the situation, seeing that he was sinking to the bottom, that they dived in, grabbed him and tried to pull him out. But all the while, as he was coming back to the surface, this kid was flailing and throwing elbows and doing everything he could. The guy that brought him back to the surface to get some air caught a couple of elbows in the eye and in the nose. This is how I see what Iran is doing currently. Look, whether you approve of this or don't approve of this action, the first few days were an unmitigated success. They were able to decapitate the entire command structure. And currently what's happening is that what remains is flailing. It's not out of a desire to cause chaos. And there have been spokespeople that came out from the Iranian regime. It was not us. We did not intend to hit you. We just want to hit the Americans. Because they understand how this plays. They understand that it doesn't look good that they're attacking other Muslim nations willy-nilly. So that to me is the silver lining. That the entire Muslim world has not coalesced around the Iranian regime and said, oh, we're backing you full tilt. Now, I know I said a lot of things over the past few weeks that could be under the headline of American Prophetic. But one of the things that you might have missed that I said, and I remember saying it, is that when this thing sparks off, you're going to see who your friends and who your enemies are. Currently, the English said, we want nothing to do with this. The Spanish said, nope, no, sorry, you cannot use our bases for anything. And you could see those who pretended to be our friends for the sake of something or another. And the moment it was no longer advantageous to be a friend of the United States, they ran away. Now, I understand everybody likes paella, but I don't like it enough to continue treating Spain as a friendly nation when they said no. The French, I know. Everybody's like, oh, the French. We speak a lot of funny things about the French, but they are very brave people. Apparently not. What was the first thing Macron said? By international law, but we don't believe that this is just. Well, the problem is this. And I know I'm going to get emails and I'm going to get flack and you're going to be angry, but this is the reality on the ground. This thing was going to happen. It was either going to happen on Iran's terms or on our terms. Iran was vying for time, and I understand the same elitist mindset that allowed Gavin Newsom to say, I can't read just like you, is the same mindset that says, well, they couldn't have done anything because they're just a bunch of goat herders. Well, we can see in real time that they have some stuff. And what the intelligence said Contrary to the lady in Pensacola who is in her moo-moo sipping on her iced tea. And no, I don't know who that person is. Just generalize it, because there's a lot of people with opinions, man. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody is now just the most erudite and knowledgeable individual regarding Middle East geopolitics, about Iran's capabilities, whether or not they were close to having nuclear weapons, or whether or not they were just building missiles like there was no tomorrow, because that would have been a deterrent for the West to do anything, because, well, now we got too many missiles for us to mess with. So taking all that into account, if this was going to happen anyway, better on our terms than theirs. That is my position. Because if we had done nothing, and 6 months from now or a year from now, they started lobbing missiles just as they are today, and the loss of life wouldn't have been limited to 6 or 10, but to a few hundred, I'll let you guess what the narrative would have been. Because it's not about right and wrong. It's not about moral or immoral. The only thing certain people are concerned with is getting back the power they lost. And they believe that if they can make this thing out to be unlawful, unreasonable, whatever, then they will retake power in the midterms and in the presidential elections 3 years from now. I ran across this article, and it has nothing to do with what's currently happening in the Middle East, but it's a very telling thing nevertheless. So I know the big narrative for the longest time has been the release of the Epstein files. We got to identify the perverts and put them in prison. I agree. However, there was a motion, or at least a resolution, that was put forth by Nancy Mace that was aimed at forcing the House Ethics Committee to release all its records on investigations into sexual misconduct involving lawmakers. If you are not aware, there is an actual slush fund in Washington that pays off victims of congressional members, of Senate members, whenever they come out and accuse said members, both of the House and the Senate, of inappropriate conduct. 99% of the time, it's sexual inappropriate conduct. So all these people clamoring for the release of the Epstein files, we must have justice, just voted overwhelmingly to table the resolution. 38 Republicans and 27 Democrats were the only people that supported the measure. If you want justice, kids, let's have justice. I mean, it's easy to go, we want the release of those files, because, you know, most of those people are either dead or in their 80s, and they're never going to see a day inside a prison cell, because by the time the court gets around to actually putting the case on a docket and all this, Bill Clinton will be dead. Hillary Rodham Clinton will be in a double layer of adult diapers, because they're going to drag their feet on this. And by the by, did you see Bill Clinton at his deposition? There's a video that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. Bill Clinton was looking through a folder of pictures from way back when. And it's as though he was reliving those memories and smiling broadly to the point that his attorney had to take it away from him. Because it didn't look right. Look, there's an old study that psychopaths, especially those that go on murder sprees, will request photographs of their crime scenes so they can relive those moments. If you haven't seen the video, it's everywhere. You should look at it. Because Bill Clinton's face when he was looking through those pictures, I don't know what the pictures were, but likely it wasn't puppies or kittens, because his attorney was not a happy camper. She snatched it away from me. He tried to get it back. I'm not done. Again, if you want justice, then justice has to be across the board. It can't be applied only to people that either fled the country, are in their 90s, that have Alzheimer's and have lost their minds, or have more money than they know what to do with, so they're never going to see prison. But it should also apply to current House and Senate members that are still young enough to stand trial and still young enough to actually see the inside of a prison cell. Justice for all. That's the premise. 38 Republicans and 27 Democrats were the only people that supported the measure. Justice. And under the resolution, the panel would be required to publicly release all reports, conclusions, draft reports, recommendations, and accompanying materials within 60 days of adoption. Personally identifiable information of victims or alleged victims would be redacted to protect their privacy. Now, the reason for the reason this resolution came about and got shot down by both Republicans and Democrats, this isn't a one-sided issue. There's a lot of perverts in government on both sides. The resolution comes in the wake of Representative Tony Gonzalez, Republican of Texas, facing sharp criticism from a growing number of colleagues over allegations he's had an affair with a staffer who later died by self-deletion. I know there will probably be a fight on the floor. It'll probably go down and be tabled, but this is the kind of transparency Congress needs right now. We're talking about members like Tony Gonzalez. This young woman killed herself in the most horrific way. By the way, she set herself on fire. And we're just going to shrug it off and let the process play out. Nancy Mace told 24 Sight News on Tuesday. Justice for all. The fact that there's a slush fund earmarked for payoffs for victims of senators and congresspeople should tell you everything you need to know about government. The fact that it was voted down and tabled so overwhelmingly should also shed a light on how many people know they have skeletons in the closet. Multiple Republican women have taken aim at Gonzalez over the accusations, calling for him to step down. Representative Ana Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, introduced a censure resolution to formally condemn the Texas lawmaker who faces a runoff battle against primary opponent and gun rights activist Brandon Herrera after the incumbent failed to garner 50% of the vote on Tuesday. Mace said she's also exploring options to expose an alleged slush fund, it's not alleged, it's documented, used to pay off sexual harassment claims in Congress, adding that she plans to subpoena the slush fund on the Oversight Committee. That's the one way to get it. The House Ethics Committee, which announced an investigation into Gonzalez on Wednesday, came out against the Mace resolution, making the case it could re-traumatize victims and hinder their ability to get witnesses to cooperate. Couldn't you make the same argument for the Epstein files? You could. So let's not, re-traumatizing victims, please. You know why you're saying no. And this is supposed to be the House Ethics Committee. I think it would be in Nancy Mace's best interest to make a video and put it online insisting that she's not depressed, she doesn't have thoughts of self-harm, she's not suicidal, because if she keeps on with this, this is the level these people are playing at. So I think it would be in her best interest to come out and say, I have no thoughts of hurting myself. I have no thoughts of harming myself. Keep that in mind if anything happens to me. 38 Republicans and 27 Democrats. That's all you need to know, kids. The House Ethics Committee, again, the House Ethics. The people that are supposed to be on the moral soapbox said, nah, we don't want any part of this. Unbelievable. Justice for all. Because it's likely 20 years from now, all of this will be released and everybody's going to clutch their pearls. But by that time, 80% of these people will be dead. The other 20% will be in their 90s. And there comes a point where you realize that justice delayed is justice denied. So the same people that are so vociferous about release the Epstein files should be on board for this. If you want true justice, if you want to unmask the rot, if you want to open it all up and go, this is the level of monstrosity going on in DC, then be equally as enthusiastic about this as you were about the other thing. All members of the committee treat their roles with solemn responsibility and utmost seriousness. Indeed. That's why you have a slush fund to pay off victims, because you treat your role with solemn responsibility and utmost seriousness. Regardless of party affiliation, there's a shared view that sexual harassment and workplace misconduct in particular have no place in the halls of Congress. Well, this perhaps is a memo you should have sent yourself, don't you think? Here and elsewhere, perpetrators of sexual misconduct should never be shielded from responsibility for their misdeeds, the committee said in a statement. Except for this case, except for exposing on behalf of which senator and which congressman individuals were paid off to go away. Well, every other case, sure, but not when it comes to us. And by us, I don't mean Republican or Democrat, but the people in power. We believe the forced disclosures mandated by House Resolution 1072 could chill victim cooperation and witness participation in ongoing and future investigations. Let me let you in on a little secret, you pompous jackasses. If you make an example of those who are demonstrably guilty and those on behalf of whom monies was paid to victims, you won't have a need for future investigation. You take a congressman who's guilty of this, demonstrably so, based on investigations, you throw him in prison for 30 years. Guess what? Viagra sales will dip in Washington, D.C. Victims may be re-traumatized by public disclosures of interim work product. The thing said we're not going to disclose the names of the victims to protect them. No, right. It may be intuited. You see how perverse and double-tongued and hypocritical and just disgusting. Are you starting to get an idea of just how big of a cesspool Washington, D.C. is? Victims may be re-traumatized by public disclosures of interim work product, excerpts of interview transcripts, and certain exhibits. Why didn't you apply that to the other thing? Because you thought you had a gotcha moment, didn't you? You thought there was evidence of the big orange man doing something unscrupulous, and bang! Release it all, release it. Now, release this. I'd like a list. As a tax-paying U.S. citizen, I would like a list of every congressperson and senator on behalf of whom taxpayer money was paid to victims to keep them quiet. This is present. It's not 30 years ago. It's not 40 years ago. Now. It's happening now. Current investigations and future investigations. And I promise you this. If they're able to table this, if none of these things come out, it will only embolden the perverts to continue in their perversion. It will make them feel as though they are above the law. My name's never getting released. They already paid $6, $7, $8 million to 37 women. What's another one? Huh? Yeah, I know. God bless America. Whew. I don't want to get angry. I had a good day yesterday. My girls went to jiu-jitsu. And when they got home, because I don't do jiu-jitsu. My wife does jiu-jitsu. The girls do it. God bless them. They enjoy it. I'm more of a practical man. I'd rather not get in a scuffle. And if I do, I'm not going to try to put you in an arm bar. Sorry. But I asked my little one, she's 8 years old. She looks like Twiggy. She's just all skin and bones and knobby knees. And I asked her, how did it go, kiddo? And she says to me, it was great. We practiced arm bars and submission holds, and I made a boy cry. See? Joy. That just gave me joy. Apparently, the boy wasn't crying because she made him hurt, but because he had to tap. He had to submit. because she put him in an arm bar and it was hurting. So he had to tap. It was beautiful. So find your joy wherever you can. That's where I found my joy yesterday. It was lovely. And I know you're thinking to yourself, talk about all the stuff that's happening. Why? It'll just cloud your soul. Because war is ugly. That's the definition of it. And I know that with every service member that loses their life, there will be an uproar and a chorus. And I'm sad and it's tragic. You don't want to see America's bravest losing their lives. Thus far, it's 6 individuals, and you weep for all of them. Twice as much died in Chicago this past weekend. And I can see a situation from opposing sides. I understand the tragedy of American soldiers losing their lives. I also understand that this is a volunteer force, and when young men and young women go to sign up for the Army or the Navy, they do so fully aware that they may be called up to go to war. Now, I understand some signed up just for the free transgender surgery, but that's not what the definition of an army is. So yes, if you sign up, you may be called upon to go to war. That said, the big thing on the interwebs now is send Barron Trump. Well, if there was a draft and he got drafted and he decided to dodge it, then yes, shame on him. But as long as the U.S. Armed Forces are on a volunteer basis, yelling, send Barron Trump, just shows your hate for somebody, an entire family. And look, I get it. The big orange man said there would be no new wars. That he did. There was a good faith effort at diplomacy. There was a good faith effort on trying to iron out a deal. But the sticking point to all of this was the nuclear weapons. The regime wanted them. The U.S. insisted they could never have them. And because every time they walked away from the negotiation table, nothing happened to the Ayatollah, nothing happened to the regime, they thought this would just be a repeat of previous events. We walk away, they do nothing, we keep going and doing what we want to do. Didn't happen like that. Now, for those that feel some kind of way, because the big orange man said no new wars, and even though this is not a war, it's not a declaration of war, currently we're just air bombing targets, missile or otherwise. I do think that putting boots on the ground would be a horrible idea. I think the Iranian people need to take their country back. But I'm going to tell you a story that doesn't put me in the best light, but it is nevertheless the truth. A few years back, well, more than a few years now, because it was before the girls. So at least 13 years ago, the wife and I were driving to Florida. We'd left Wisconsin. We were like halfway through Georgia. And we were only a few hours away from our destination. And I turned to my wife and said, we're not going to be stopping anymore until we get there. No more stops, woman. She said, okay. And I meant what I said until the 7-layer burrito from Taco Bell, which I'd eaten about 2 hours prior, forced me to break my word. It wasn't intentional. I hadn't lied to my wife. But it was either soil myself or keep my word. And if I'd soiled myself, it wouldn't have been good for either of us. So I said, hey, we need to make a pit stop. And she gave me that one-eyed, eyebrow thing. And she goes, okay. Because she understood that if I broke my word, it was for a good reason and it wasn't intentional. Because this is the thing that they keep hammering. He said no new wars. He tried to negotiate. He tried to hammer out a deal. But in order for a deal to be struck, both parties have to agree on the terms. Ours was very simple. You do not get to have no nuclear weapons. I'm sorry. That was our sticking point. Their sticking point was, but we want the nuclear weapons. So I understand both sides. I do believe that had we not done anything, had Israel gone on their own and attacked Iran, and that's another thing. Do you think that the 9 million people in Israel are very excited about bombs raining down on them and go, we haven't had any excitement for a couple days. We should hit Iran so they can hit us back. Come on. Like, we can't. And it's happening among Christians more and more, where they're falling for this narrative that there would be peace on earth were Israel eliminated from the chessboard. You do understand that to people like the Ayatollah Khomeini and his ilk, Israel is the little Satan. You're the big Satan. By you, I mean America. So take a step back, take a breath, pray for peace, pray for the protection of American soldiers, pray for cooler heads to prevail. But understand that this is the world we live in. War is ugly. War is brutal. People die. And even in a court of law, they weigh out intent, premeditation, and that's something we need to start kind of weighing into this entire thing as well. Because it hasn't been confirmed yet. But I promise you, nobody intended for a school full of girls to be bombed. Now, the intelligence differs. They say it wasn't us. They say it was the Iranians that sent a rocket that didn't go where it was supposed to. Even if it was us, you have to weigh intent and analyze it through the prism of intent. It's sad. It's tragic. That's what war is. And the one thing I noticed that I'm waiting to see play out. We've American prophetic a lot of stuff that has already come to pass. Oh my! Is that when this thing first started, Volodymyr Zelensky had the temerity to praise American wherewithal and this administration from doing the difficult thing. I'm waiting to see the narrative shift among the Democratic Party where they're no longer wearing Ukrainian pins or yelling Slava Ukraina. Because to them, it's a zero-sum game. If you approve or agree with anything anyone in this administration does, then you are our sworn enemy, period. So I'm waiting to see that play out. I'm waiting to see the current it's never mind. I'm not even going to go there. All right. I'm going to be nice and I'm not even going to go there. But it's only a matter of time before the worm turns. It's only a matter of time because Volodymyr Zelensky said something nice about the big orange man, and we can't have that. Now, on a more serious note, there are things that are up in the air. China seems to be holding back. Russia only verbally said a few things, but doesn't seem to want to get into this kerfuffle. And of all the nations currently in play, I think China has the most to lose from this because it eliminates another source of oil for them. I'm not one of those people that go, well, this is 4D chess. I can't bring myself to say that. But two of China's biggest distributors of oil, providers of oil, Venezuela and Iran, have lost their ability to provide China its oil. So they will feel constrained by this. And where this goes, God only knows, but he does. So, Lord willing, we'll be with you again next week. We'll see how this progresses. Hopefully, it's short-lived. Hopefully, next week we'll say, oh, the end of Iranian air raids. But in order for that to happen, the people of Iran need to see the opportunity they have to take their country back. And only time will tell if they do. With that, I thank you all for listening. I'm running out of time, and I'm sure Gino is just chomping at the bit to say his thing. So, Gino, it's on you, buddy.
Hey, Michael, actually, I'm going to promote handofhelp.com, our books and our music, and also urge you to let others know about the Light of Truth radio broadcast. If you want to know where we're all at, we're on YouTube. Believe it or not, we didn't get axed from YouTube yet. We thought we were probably a week or two away 2 years ago from getting cut, but somehow they have not done that. So we're on YouTube and we're on Rumble, and let people know about the broadcast. And my word of advice, get in the Word of God like you've never done before. Get at the altar of God and pray like you've never done before. Keep a humble heart, teachable heart. And this thing, not only the wars going on, rumors of wars, should all bring the church to a place of humility, repentance, and at that altar, make everything right with God. Thank you for listening to the Light of Truth radio broadcast.
Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com. or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.
They are all leaving and turning upside down.